California.
Huell. And here we are on a glorious day here in Southern California in the desert. In fact, we're about as far south as you can get and still be in California. That's Mexico right over there. Now you see this rusty old track we're walking down? This track is part of one of the least known yet most historically important railroads ever to serve California. It cuts through some of the harshest terrain anywhere in the world. When it was built back in the early 1900s, it was considered an engineering marvel, and it's still considered an engineering marvel today. It just cuts right out across the desert. There haven't been any trains running on this track for years now, but that's fixing to change because we're getting ready to load aboard this old speeder and this old rail bus, head down the track and recreate some wonderful old railroad history. And if you're up for the trip, as always, you're invited to join us as we head down the rails in search of California's gold. Its formal name was the San Diego and Arizona Railway, but it was quickly nicknamed the Impossible Railroad. It was the brainchild of John Spreckels, the sugar magnate, shown here driving the gold spike in 1919. Mr. Spreckels was a big San Diego booster and thought a person ought to be able to travel east by rail without going through Los Angeles first. So he financed this railroad, which was 148 miles long, from San Diego to El Centro, where it hooked up with the Southern Pacific and continued east. Now, this was not your traditional little railroad. The route itself dipped down into Mexico and then cut through some of the roughest terrain imaginable. But it worked, and worked well, until the late 1970s when it went out of business. Today, the track is closed, but we hooked up with a group from the San Diego Railroad Museum for a trip back into one of the roughest and most remote sections of the old railroad. We were heading for Carrizo Gorge. Our tour guides, among others, were some fellows who used to work on the old railroad and were full of great stories. The scenery along this section was spectacular, and we were having a great time. But right away, we were reminded just why this was called the Impossible Railroad. Well, we got about, what, a half a mile?
Half a mile.
And look what we got. Our first problem here.
Looked like a big one. Maybe we can move it out of the way to get by.
Now, you used to work on maintaining the tracks.
That's right.
Is this the kind of thing that would happen?
Absolutely. When it would rain or come an earthquake, sometimes we patrol the track 24 hours a day for this type of operation.
These things would just come right down
Come down off of the mountaintop.
Wow. And what happened when you found a rock this big?
Well, if it's too big we couldn't handle it, we would call the bridge gang, and they had dynamite with them. They would come down and blast them.
Anybody got any dynamite?
Not today. We don't have it.
Well, how are we going to move this? We want this trip to... This is an adventure. It's going to last all day.
There's a little manpower on this. We got plenty of manpower here. We can twist you around here.
Wow. You're organizing this. Now, how are we going to do it?
Well, I'm thinking instead of rolling it off, that we rotate it. It's easier if we put all of our manpower on this one side, rotate it counterclockwise. I see this groove here. We should just clear the rail. If we get it over, turn it about 45 degrees.
Let's do it. All right, let's do it. Here we go.
Everybody over here. Wait, get over here. Everybody over here.
You know how much this thing weighs?
Whoa!
You know how much this weighs? You're not going to...
Oh my gosh.
Bring a sledgehammer, we can bust it up.
What do we do now, Mr. Foreman?
Do you have any sledge?
How much did we do to the clerk? Can we chip it off?
Yeah,
we can chip it off.
Do you have a sledge? Do we have a sledgehammer?
So we just need a couple of inches taken off of it.
We could just chip it off.
Yeah. Wow, we didn't know it was going to be this kind of an adventure. This is great.
there yet.
We're not even there yet.
We're not even there yet. We'll get.
We forgot our dynamite.
Whoa! Well, we passed our first test. Is this any indication of what's down the road?
That could be. We could have more tests ahead.
But I mean, this is not unusual.
No, there's plenty of rocks up in the gorge.
Yeah.
Many more rocks.
Is that what made this, was that one of the factors that made this such a engineering feat, such a difficult route to cut out in the first place?
Well, it was a challenge, I think, from an engineering point of view. From the in very early days, some people wondered whether it could really be done. After all, you're going through some of the most rugged country in the United States.
Yeah.
And
but I mean, just the size of these rocks.
well, I think one of the challenges that one of the things I remember so well is that in bad weather we'd come down through the gorge. We always wondered if some rocks were going to come down and go through the bridges. After all, it's 1,000 feet down in the bottom of the gorge.
Wow.
And we had some bad weather here at times, and it gave you a thrill.
Did you ever hit any rocks?
Oh yes, we hit rocks, but never had a serious derailment.
Did you ever hit any rocks?
I sure did. Lots of them.
Our first tunnel.
This is Tunnel 21, and we'll be entering into the Carrizo Gorge once we pass through here. Off to the right, there will be a palm grove down in the canyon, and then we'll be approaching Tunnel 20.
So this is our first tunnel on this run, but there are a lot of them on this route, aren't there?
That's true. There's 17 tunnels in the Carrizo Gorge alone. We'll be passing through 5 of them today.
Now, how do we know the track is clear inside this tunnel?
We take it very slow and watch ahead. Blow the horn as we go.
Oh, this is just a short one.
Just a short one. It's probably under 300 feet long. And it's all lined with redwood.
Oh, look, there's the next tunnel down there.
That's Tunnel 20. The east portal is solid rock. There didn't have to be supported with a wood portal.
Oh, look over here to our right, Louis. Look at this view.
Down below, you'll see the
Oh, my
palm
God.
grove down below.
There's a palm. Oh, look there. Is that an oasis?
Yes, it is. A lot of palm. They've been there since before the line was built.
Well, there's water down there.
Yes, there is. There's water running through the gorge year-round.
Boy, this is just spectacular. Now, it looks to me like, can we stop and take a look at this tunnel?
We sure can.
We know there's nobody coming the other way, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Now, we've stopped here. This is our first stop, not counting our maintenance stop for the rock down there. And the fellows tell me, I mean, I'm all excited about seeing this view down here, and fellas, you tell me this is nothing.
Well, you're going to see a lot when you get farther up. 1,000 feet up and 1,000 feet down.
So this is just kind of a preview, right?
Preview, yeah.
All right, let's talk about why we stopped. Look at these rocks over here, the beauty of the rocks, the color of the rocks, and then straight ahead of us is the tunnel that looks to me like it was blasted right out of the rock.
It was solid rock. I believe it's blue granite, and they didn't, because it was so solid, they didn't have to line it with redwood timbers, and it's been that way ever since it was constructed.
Wow. And again, this is one of how many on this route?
There's a total of 21 tunnels on the railroad. There's 17 here in the Carrizo Gorge.
Now, are we in the gorge yet? I keep hearing about the gorge.
This is a portion of it, but not the gorge proper. That's another probably mile ahead.
So we're not yet in the gorge.
No, after we come out of Tunnel 19, then you'll be able to look off into the gorge.
Because this gorge has gotten an awful big buildup from you all.
Well, you'll see it's the real thing. It's the real.
Am I going to be disappointed, or is this...
No, you won't be disappointed. You'll be impressed, I can assure you.
Now, you all were also talking about this rail when we got out of the bus there.
Well, this amazed me because I rode over this rail as a little boy, and it's hard to believe that it's the same rail. It's 1917.
How do we know it's from 1917?
Because they have the manufacturer, whichever company made this, stamped some information along the side of the rail, on the inside of the web of the rail, and you can get down there on your hands and knees and you'll see the date.
So this has been here since 1917.
It was laid for under construction when the railroad was being built.
1919?
The 1919 right here.
And you know what? Looking around here, this probably hadn't changed much since
I
1919.
think my dad helped lay this rail because he was on construction here.
Now we've just come through Tunnel 19, and this gives you some kind of an idea out here. We are now officially in the gorge, right?
That's correct. You can see Carrizo Gorge. That's the Carrizo Wash down there.
But this still isn't as good as it gets,
No,
right?
It gets better than this.
But we stopped here not only to get our first look at this gorge, but to talk a little bit about Tunnel 19, because you got a Tunnel 19 story for us.
Got a Tunnel 19 story. When I worked for the bridge and building gang, we were inspecting the footings in the tunnels. We had a motor car, a speeder, we had a push car, we had a Kohler light plant on the back of it with a 5-gallon gasoline can for the gas tank with a hose in it. And the foreman, he thought the train was late, so we were just taking our time working in there, and I was at the east end of the tunnel, and all of a sudden I thought I heard a train. So I walked to the end of the tunnel, and sure enough, I did hear a train. I started running out, waving my hat as much as I could. Well, of course, the train was going too fast to stop. It went on in the tunnel, hit the push car. The gasoline splashed on the motor and caught on fire.
Oh my God.
The boss starts yelling, "Shovels, shovels!" And the engineer was wise enough. He got stopped. He had the brakes on. He opens the throttle up and pops these cylinder cocks open and snuffs out the fire.
Wow. Fellas, is that a good tunnel story?
That's a great tunnel.
Anybody got a story that's going to top that one?
That was made up right here today.
Well, we've topped ourselves now. We've stopped to take a look at something. This is amazing, Mike.
Yeah, this happened in 1983. A freight train bound to San Diego experienced a derailment on the curve over here.
Right on this curve right here.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
what happened? Was he going too fast?
No, it's not too fast. They were maybe doing 15, 20 miles an hour with the load coming up the grade. They either broke a rail, turned a rail, or broke a wheel, and the two cars went down over the side, and they were turned out they were loaded with 100-pound sacks of cement. They actually sent laborers down and unloaded one of the two box cars and salvaged a bunch of the cement.
But when something goes off the side up here, it's off for good.
It stays there.
It ain't going anywhere.
Nope. It's just another monument.
Take a look at the mountain where the big bridge is. Can you see where the whole side of that mountain has slid down?
Yeah, sure.
Well, that's what collapsed Old Tunnel 15. That's
the
reason.
whole side of
that's the
that
reason-
mountain
That's the reason
collapsed
that's
right
the
there.
reason for the big bridge. That whole mountain. When they dug through that mountain, they disturbed the core of the mountain, and the whole mountain just crushed down and crushed Tunnel 15.
Now, Mike brought us over here to show us this.
It's an interesting little feature. We've actually got some petrified wood here in the gorge.
So really, this whole area is like this could be a geology field trip we're on right now.
Oh, they'd have a ball out here. There's all different kinds of rocks, different kinds of bushes, anything they can think of, it's here.
Well, Mike, we've been about 7 miles so far. We've already had some pretty good adventures, but we're getting ready to have our biggest adventure right ahead of us, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Unfortunately, it's time to get out and walk because we're at a point now where the rails disappear.
Yeah, it looks like pretty much the end of the line.
Yes, this was a tunnel that burned out in 1986 and collapsed at both ends, and the fire itself burned for about 3 days, and there's not much left inside.
This was tunnel.
This is Tunnel 16.
What's left of it.
What's left of it, yes.
All right, fellas, this is it. The end of the line. Well, now we're on foot, fellas, and you were telling me, because, you know, I'm just in awe of this beauty here, that I'm not the first person to be in awe of it.
Well, there are many, many picturesque spots, of course, but I remember that in the early years, the railroad was trying to promote transportation, getting people to travel over this route, and there were some publicity shots and there were some postcards made. This happened to be, I think, one taken right here where you can see the trestles off in the distance, and so you see it's quite impressive because it gives a view of the canyon and the perspective of the mountains and distance and so on.
Was the idea to promote all of this as a big, exciting trip to take by passenger train?
Well, for many years, San Diego had hoped to make a rail link with the east, and this seemed to be the way to go. But due to the terrain, the difficulty, the slow travel, it never quite made up. But the first trains through here were very nice. They carried chair cars, Pullmans, they had diners, they had an observation car, and it was a very, very spectacular way to go from San Diego to go east.
Yeah.
And the Pullman made direct connection to either the Golden State Limited or the Sunset Limited in Yuma. And you could continue right on without getting off of the train.
But to get from San Diego east to Yuma, you went through some of the most beautiful, and probably people had never seen this country before, had they?
That's very true.
Because there are no roads up here.
No, that's right.
They were seeing it for the first time.
That's right. That's right. It's a very, very impressive way to go. It's rugged country.
Wow, here comes the wind.
Well, you put your hat on like this, and then you screw it on so it won't blow off.
I'm learning. I'm learning.
So anyway, that's the way it goes.
All right, let's go. We got to walk all the way around here, and when we get around the mountain, that's the payoff. That's what we've made this whole trip to do, is to see what's on the other side of this trail on the side of this mountain. Now, you just pointed out something very interesting to me, that this is truly a historic trail we're walking on.
That's correct, because you realize that these tunnels were built from both ends, and they met in the middle. And they hoped they met in the middle, and they always did. So this means of communication or connection, the two crews would be via a trail like this around the mountain.
So the workers would actually be...
They would walk, they would push their wheelbarrows if they had to, hand-drawn equipment. In those days, there was very little power equipment. It's just all hand work.
How long did they live out here?
Well, we don't know exactly. I suppose they took little furloughs into town, but they essentially lived here for several years during the construction period.
Because there's nothing out there.
No, there isn't. There was no TV in those days and no radio.
Well, I mean, no food.
No hot showers.
And how long did it take to build this railroad?
Well, they started construction in 1907, and it was completed in 1919.
Well, you can just imagine what it was like, and drilling, setting dynamite, blasting, and cleaning away.
They were just out here working.
That's all it was just day in, day out working. At the end of the day, they'd have a hot meal, go back to work first thing in the morning.
Well, one thing they had while they were working was a nice view.
They had a view and also fresh air.
Well, we're almost to the payoff. And there it is. Look at that. That's what we hiked up here to see, Mike.
Well, Huell, this is why we wanted you to come out. The Goat Canyon Trestle was one of the tallest wooden structures in everyday use in the United States while the railroad was running. It was 185 feet tall, 600 feet long, with a 15-degree curve on the east end of the trestle.
This is impressive.
Well, I remember I came out here several times. My dad was on construction, and I watched them lower these, you might call them sections. Those are called bents. Each one of those wooden sections had to be held up by a crane and then lowered down slowly and guided into position by men down below. And it was a very scary and challenging task. So each one of those bents was made on the ground, taken out, elevated, and lowered down in position.
So you watched it being built?
I was a young fellow then.
Well, now we need to point out, this wasn't here when the original railroad was built,
Oh
was
no,
it?
this came as a result of the tunnel catastrophe where the mountain, see the old tunnel over there? See the tunnel and the portal of the tunnel?
Oh, right in the middle of the trestle.
And that's right.
And the new tunnel is over here.
That's right. And my father was the engineer on the last freight train that went through that one night. And then the whole thing, the mountain just slid over.
Oh, that's the mountain that you were talking about earlier that just kind of
That's it.
came down.
So to get around that, they built a new short tunnel
Right
and this
here.
bridge. And this
And the
bridge.
bridge, and they built that in,
1932.
you know, this has kind of almost an eerie feel to it, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, and has a lot of nostalgia too for those of us who were here many years ago. I was here as a boy, riding trains with my father, and later working on the railroad. Now coming back here many years later, and impressed to see how well maintained it is. Really,
Well, it's
Aside
like
from
it's
the
frozen
tunnels
in
being down.
time.
Aside from the tunnels being down, it's just remarkable. It's just like having been asleep for a long time and waking up, and nothing has changed.
Look at this. Boy, when you get up here close to it, you really, for the first time, it's one thing to look at it from a distance. It's another to see it up close like
Many
this.
people came out here thinking that they wanted to work. They were carpenters or they had some skill. They stay a few days and leave. They couldn't handle this high work.
Boy, is that made out of wood or out of steel? I can't
all
tell.
wood. All wooden construction. Those pilings and those bents are all wooden.
And this has been here like this since 1932.
1932, and it's still in very good condition.
Man. And I guess they fixed this up so you could walk on it, so I don't know.
I usually tend to walk
Yeah,
the
it's-
center of the ties.
Sir?
I usually tend to walk the center of the ties. A little stronger than some of the walkways.
Well, I don't know. This could be our last view. We might wave to our family and friends as we head out across. This is what you call accepting something on faith.
I like to close my eyes and imagine that there's 3 locomotives pulling a 16-car passenger train across here. And that's what we saw many times. It's hard to believe now, but it did exist.
With passengers looking out the window
That's right.
at this.
Sitting in the diner, having dinner, looking out at this view. I've always been impressed with the height up here and how you look down there, you tend to get a little vertigo. And I remember that there were many workers who came out here thinking they would have a job, and after about 2 or 3 days, they'd give up and go home because they couldn't stand the height.
Yeah. Boy. Now this, wait a minute.
You know, that's getting loose.
The lag bolt right on.
Yeah,
Well,
it's beginning to show its age.
I don't know about this. This is what I was holding on to. I think I'm going to move over here to the other side. See? Oh my gosh, it just gets, I don't know whether this will pick up on the camera or not, but the whole idea of just being out here in this quiet place that nobody knows about.
Yep, except for a few occasional planes over the top. It's very peaceful out here. Come out here and just enjoy. It's very spectacular.
And it's part of Anza Borrego State Park, so it's going to be preserved forever.
Yes, it is. The railroad has the right of way through here, and both sides of us is all Anza Borrego State Park. Lots of interesting animals and interesting people out here too.
No trains.
Not yet. We're working on it.
You know, it's been 26 years since I've been across this bridge.
Really? Well, welcome back.
Don't forget, he's 92 years old. You're just a young guy, so you got to appreciate what we've got here.
Well, I appreciate the history, and I appreciate the stories that most of us have never heard before.
Right.
Thank you for sharing them with us.
Thank you.
happy
It's
to
been
do
a
it.
great privilege to be with you.